today marks the 14th anniversary of one of my favorite political moments. The moment that an Iraq father yells at war criminal George W. Bush for the killing of hundreds of thousands of women, children, and innocent people in Iraq. I remember this moment vividly, and I thought, wow, good for this father for doing this in this moment. And then he threw his shoes at George W. Bush. Do you remember this? Watch. Unbelievable. 30 people stepping on this guy for throwing shoes at George W. Bush. He yelled.
I remember it parodied a lot in late night comedy.
Yeah. Oh, they just had fun with it, right? Yeah. It's like, oh, it's a funny moment. He's very fast. He could avoid shoes.
Oh, watch out those shoes. Yeah.
But of course, throwing your shoes there is a huge insult, right? Because you're basically saying like what you've done is like worth the bottom of my shoe.
Yes.
Right. Huge insult. And what of course was lost in all of that is what he yelled at the time that no one focused on or talked about, which was, this is from the widows. This is from the orphans. All of those who were killed in Iraq threw his shoe at the guy. Now, of course, in the West right now, we celebrate these war criminals like George W. Bush by giving them a platform to teach us leadership, like on Masterclass. Watch.
The chief executive has got to be bold within reason and daring in application. I recognize very few people watching this will become president, but I think you'll find lessons in leadership that will apply to your life. The challenge of life is to improve and to learn to love better, and everybody can do that. I'm George W. Bush, and this is Masterclass.
Yeah. Could you imagine signing up for that shit? Could you imagine? Honey, what are you doing? You can't come down for dinner right now? No. I'm knee deep. I'm about 5 lessons into my master class with George W. Bush on leadership.
Even today, I watched a video of Barack Obama talking about how not to be a troll online because judging other people is not activism. And so there are better ways to get things done. He also killed millions of people in Syria, millions, by backing the Al-Qaeda faction, and telling lies about Bashar al-Assad in order to attack that region and kill people, issue sanctions of mass destruction, what many call. I think history will remember him also as a war criminal, just like George Bush. But we laud him because he's so cool, because he's so likable. Both of these guys are the same. Yeah, they're the same. And now they both carried out many genocides in the Middle East for the sake of money, for their voters, for their power. The same.
Yeah. Barack Obama, like, he was the peace candidate, a Nobel Peace Prize winning candidate, and he increased the drone program by 400%.
Yes. Yeah. So these guys, applauds, right? Because this is how we rehabilitate these guys. We rehabilitate war criminals like Bush and Condoleezza Rice and Dick Cheney and Barack Obama, giving them book deals and inviting them on talk shows and having them on CNN, etc. They invite them on for analysis, right? Or they hire them. Now they're part of their payroll. So back to Yemen. There's no daylight at all between these people, between Democrats and Republicans, when it comes to supporting the invasions and destructions of these countries where thousands of people are killed by our weapons. And then famine sets in. See, I love climate change bullies, because climate change bullies will tell you that global warming causes famine and disease. But according to the data, that's actually a lie. It's not true at all. That is utter bullshit. And it's a line that they give us to make us feel like this is what's sowing discord. Like people who live there are basically so primitive that they will fight over like a morsel of food because they have no other. It's also just a racist
narrative. I'm sorry I interrupted.
No, but it's true. It's like, okay, so it's the reason that these people are so poor and they have famine and they have disease and kids with distended bellies is because of climate change. No, actually, the number one cause of famine is war. And the number one cause of war in the world is thanks to the United States. So screw your climate change. Shove your climate change up your ass. Stop war and you'll stop this shit. There's an idea for you, but they won't because they're cowards. They're spineless little sea urchins. Maybe the climate change nuts might actually do better by gluing themselves to paintings. They could do more by this than, throwing soup on paintings. Maybe they could fly to Yemen. They could actually walk around and draw attention to a real cause for once. Like, wouldn't it be amazing if they got cameras? See, they won't do it, though, because there's nothing to show. So they'll go to Yemen, and there's nothing left. It's all been destroyed. So they'd have nothing to glue themselves to and throw soup upon because there's nothing there. And, oh, by the way, what a travesty that would be to waste soup during a famine.
Yeah, but I think the nonsensical nature of gluing yourself, like there was a guy in Germany who glued himself to the street.
Yeah.
And then they had to weld out part of the pavement. And and I was like, just leave him there. That's his fault. You know?
Like, why are you saving him? Let him, yeah.
Yeah. And so that's just as nonsensical. So you could glue yourself to the ground for Yemen. Then I would say, get that guy out of here. He's made a point.
Yeah, no, actually, that would be great. All of the climate change bullies right now that want to tell us how to live our lives, fly to Yemen. And, that's
glue
fine.
yourself to something
glue
there.
Yourself to something.
You won't, because you're at risk of drone strikes and ground fighting.
So yesterday, spineless Bernie Sanders removed his bill from the Senate, which would have ended the U.S.-backed genocide in Yemen. Here's David DeCamp writing for antiwar.com, one of our favorite websites here on this show. Senator Bernie Sanders, he writes, on Tuesday night, withdrew his request to vote on the Yemen War Powers Resolution that would end U.S. support for the Saudi-led war and blockade on Yemen, citing White House opposition to the bill. So he caught word that the White House was going to torpedo the bill, and he pulled back and pulled out his support. Senator Sanders said on the floor that he was informed ahead of the scheduled vote of the administration's opposition to the legislation, meaning President Biden, the demented puppet, would veto the resolution.
He was told that the president was actively calling other representatives and lobbying against the bill, asking them not to vote for it. Why is Biden doing the bidding of sending more money to Saudi Arabia? Why?
I asked this question of Colonel Douglas McGregor on this very issue. Here's what he had to say.
Biden was very specific about ending this war. That was one of the planks in his campaign platform. But he's reneged on a number of things, so this is not a complete surprise. We're under enormous pressure from our strategic partners in the Middle East, Israel, Saudi Arabia, the Emirates, to keep the pressure on Yemen. Now, from the very beginning, we were reluctant, frankly, because we knew that the Shia that are down south that were fighting against the Sunnis for their lives were actually fighting against al-Qaeda, which was being supported out of Saudi Arabia. So we weren't terribly excited about supporting them. And the other thing that people don't understand is that initially when the Shia that lived down in the southern part of Yemen and asked for assistance and help, we're not going to help you. You've got to make the best deal you can. So they went back and tried to negotiate with the Saudis and ended up nowhere. So then they went back to the Iranians and said, we can't get a deal. They want to annihilate us. You've got to help us. And that's why the Iranians got involved, because it's peripheral to their greater strategic interests, frankly. Saudi Arabia is very fragile, and we've seen many attacks launched by the Shia down there that had a devastating impact on Saudi Arabia. This is only going to get worse in the near future because the people in Yemen have their backs against the wall. There has been a humanitarian disaster, and anybody who's lost family members down there, as many have, to any number of problems, disease, famine, airstrikes, you name it, these people are not going to give up. The fact that we are now going to continue supporting it is tragic because it really is not in our interest to see this boil over and fester. But I'm afraid that's what's going to happen. and there's not a great deal that we can do to stop it. And I am disappointed that Senator Sanders, who was a strong voice opposed to this, has now capitulated. But I'm sure he's being put under enormous pressure by the same major actors and lobbyists in Washington, D.C.
And since the war started in 2014, estimates range on how many people have been killed. Everyone agrees at a minimum. EP report saying as high as 1.3 million people killed by the year 2030. By the year 2030. Unbelievable. This would be the war dead. The war deaths would reach 377,000 by the end of the year, according to the UN.
Okay. Well, that's awful. And it's really too bad that Congress couldn't get its act together to at least put a vote on the floor to do a small part in stopping this.
Yeah. Thank you so much for watching this segment here at Redacted. We are live every day at 4 p.m. Eastern Time, trying to share the stories that the mainstream media will not cover. You should also come over and join our community of Redacted Rebels over at Redacted.inc. That's our private locals community where we can share exclusive content that we simply cannot share here on YouTube. Come over and join the rebellion together right now by going to Redacted.inc. We'll see you next time.